What's going on, everybody? Aiden from Birds vs. Boys here, coming to you after the Eagles survive against the Carolina Panthers to go to 11-2 on the season, first in the NFC East. It is not my favorite game of all time. It is not a game that we will write home about. It is not going to be our favorite game from the season. If anything, it reminds me of the game in 2022 against the Colts where they survived on the road and had to come back to beat Indianapolis, a kind of middling team then, and did the same thing here today against Carolina to survive and get the win. We are live on YouTube this way. We are live on TikTok this way. We will take everybody's comments as they filter in. I appreciate everybody who's been tuning in live on TikTok when we do our fantasy football streams with Start and Sit. We did one right before the 1 p.m. slate, and it actually worked out really well for us. And then I appreciate everybody who's been watching live on YouTube as we react to all of these games. And I think a lot of these reactions have been a lot more positive over the past 2 months when we're talking about the Eagles. Today, even with the win, not so much. And I'll tell you what, in terms of national headlines, when people talk about this game, I don't even think that people will discuss the Eagles a lot. I think the larger story from this game is the Carolina Panthers, who are flawlessly executing a tank, by the way, because it's now 3 straight weeks since Bryce Young's been back. He's looked awesome. He totally outplayed Jalen Hurts today. They play really well. Back-to-back weeks, they went to overtime. Today, they had a chance to go on a 98-yard drive to win the game and almost did. They lose all 3 of those, so they improve their draft stock, all while looking like a very competent team with a franchise quarterback. So all in all, I think that is the takeaway that people are going to talk about. Much less about the Eagles, much less about how they looked, and much more about how the Carolina's Panthers look going forward into the 2025 season, and the fact that maybe they did hit on that number 1 overall pick in Bryce Young, who I thought was excellent today. And again, he totally outplayed Jalen Hurts, and we'll talk about that when it comes to the Eagles. But let's start with the Panthers. Let's start with Bryce Young, because I thought the key to the game was their success on 3rd downs and on 4th downs. They were nearly flawless till the end there. And a lot of that was Adam Thielen. It was the first time you saw some of those young guys on our Eagles defense look young. Adam Thielen in the slot on 3rd down. How many? 3 or 4 that he had just himself on 3rd or 4th down. He had 8 receptions for 96 yards. He had Cooper DeJean on skates a few times. It was really the veterans in that back end that saved the day. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson had a few big hits, almost knocked himself out of the game twice, hitting so hard. And then Darius Slay with the pass breakup at the end of that game, phenomenal. Saved the day for him. He had a few of those in the game. I think 2 4th downs. He had the pass breakup. He was really, really good. It reminds you of who he can be when he's healthy. I thought it was key to give him a week off. I know he had the concussion, but a lot of the talk was, hey, why don't we just sit Darius for a week so that he can survive this whole season and make it through 17 games plus playoffs? Because for a while there, it was looking like he was getting banged up every single week. It was his knee was hurting. He was really, really good refresh today, and they needed it because they were hurting on the back end, down a few safeties in that game without Reed Blankenship, and then Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was in and out. So they needed that, and the young guys were really struggling. Adam Thielen is a pros pro. They talked about it on the broadcast. It's been 10 or 11 years in this league. We've seen this since he was a Minnesota Viking. One of the best route runners in the league, one of the most underrated route runners in the league, and he kind of put on a masterclass against a young secondary and some guys who were backing up at the safety spot too. He was the safety net for Bryce Young all day, and it was flawless. And I'll tell you what, even more impressive, which has been a criticism of the Carolina Panthers, is the fact that they were able to keep Bryce Young upright. And even when they couldn't keep him upright, Bryce Young was shedding skin like a snake. It felt like there were 3 or 4 sacks that they missed because they ripped his shirt off, and he just kept going and converted the play. He had half of a sleeve left by the end of that game because they would grab his shirt, pull him down, and then that'd be it. And then he'd get out of it. And he did that so many times. So they were effective in keeping him upright so he could get the ball downfield to Adam Thielen and to try to get it to Xavier Legette and all of those different things. And then they were all successful in running the ball. And Chuba Hubbard, and this is a guy that we talked about, actually him and Thielen, when we were talking fantasy football this week, we were worried that despite their success in recent weeks, it would not hold up because the Eagles defense has been playing so well. It held up and then some. It kept them in this game. It kept them not only in this game, but they were dominating at parts of that game. And it felt like we didn't see the Eagles offense for stretches, and they couldn't get in rhythm with Saquon Barkley, and they couldn't put together long drives because the Carolina Panthers were doing that to them. Mark Sanchez brought it up on the broadcast, but he was saying the Eagles put together 10, 11 play drives a lot of the time. And then your offense is sitting there cold on the sideline. And he was like, the key to success in beating the Eagles and Saquon Barkley is to do the same exact thing to them. And that's what Bryce Young and the Panthers were able to do. When you're converting those amount of third downs, when you're able to run the ball successfully, with Chuba Hubbard like they were, that's exactly what happens. So I thought that they did a great job, one, in moving the ball, but two, keeping that Eagles offense on the sideline. And then once they got out there, the Eagles offense looked really rigid, but that was a lot to do with what the Carolina Panthers were succeeding on offense, which was running the ball early on first down, setting up third and manageables, and then completing them by finding the hot guys like Adam Thielen. So they executed it flawlessly, almost down to the end. The one time that they messed up is probably the one time that ruined the game for them, because at the end of the half there, in the first half, this is probably the key of the game. Bryce Young overthrows his receiver. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson gets the interception. Instead of the Panthers driving the ball down the field, the Eagles get the ball back, down 10-7, score touchdown at the end of the half, and then they are able to get the ball to start the second half. So that was a total flip of momentum and everything like that. And I thought that was the key to the game. And the Eagles were able to score off those turnovers. And it was the one time where the Panthers gave them life with mistakes. And I thought that was the key today. And the Eagles finally took advantage of it. On offense, there's not a lot to say with this offense. One, let's get it out of the way. We do it every week. I'm watching the end of the Giants game behind me. They're down 14-11. There's 7 people in the stands because nobody cares about this team. So I will once again thank you for giving us Saquon Barkley and allowing us to watch him every single week. He has now set the Eagles' single-season rushing yard record, beating LaShawn McCoy, over 100 yards rushing again today. It felt like he was getting 8 yards a clip, and if it felt like that, it's because he was. He rushed for over 7 yards a carry today. It was phenomenal. Again, it felt like we only saw glimpses of him because, again, the offense wasn't out there a ton, but when he was dominant. He is going to maintain his pace as the second in the MVP rankings. Thank you to the Giants for allowing us to have Saquon Barkley on our team. And even when he wasn't out there on that first drive, having Kenneth Gainwell, I liked what they were doing. I liked not only how they ran the ball, but the offensive line, some of the plays that they set up on the Gainwell 18-yard rush, having the 3, it was kind of like a counter play, and having the 3 guys in Calcaterra, A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith blocking. That was probably my favorite run of the day. So they were successful running the football. You wish they would have gotten to it more, but they shot themselves in the foot so many times on both offense and defense that you really didn't get a chance to see it. And I would have liked to see that more. But the key takeaway, as it is every week, is that Saquon Barkley is probably an MVP. And he will probably maintain that, as always. The rest of the offense, though, man, is that brutal to watch sometimes. Going into the fourth quarter, and at points in the fourth quarter, Jalen Hurts had 70 yards passing. 70. And again, let's talk about it. The Panthers were winning the time of possession battle. The last show I did reacting to a game, I said the Eagles have not only won games, they've dominated their opponents. They have more snaps. They have larger time of possession. They score more points. They win the turnover battle every single game for almost a month. So to see it today where they weren't on the field was kind of jarring. And then when they got on the field, it was certain situations where you're just like, what are we thinking? What are we doing? I go back to the drive where they always re-emphasize Saquon Barkley in the second half. And he picks up the first down, 18-yard gain. They go right back to him. It's 9. Like he's getting like 10, 12 a clip. It's crazy. And I see in the chat here, next year Panthers are a playoff team for sure. I definitely agree. If they can do well in the draft, I think they will be. But I go back to that drive and I say to myself, what are we thinking? What are we doing? So they're running the ball effectively with Saquon. Now they do a read option play where Jalen Hurts keeps it. And that part of the play, I totally understand. It looked great because they all come crashing down on Saquon after 3 successful runs. That opens up a running lane for Jalen Hurts to keep it. He does. I thought he could have gone further. He gets 8 yards in the carry. It's 2nd and 2. So it's like, all right, we could have had a first down, but it's still 2nd and short. Sitting there at 2nd and short, you're a little bit frustrated there. But the following play, after all of this success running the ball, they try to pass the ball. Jalen Hurts takes a sack, and then you're put in like 3rd and 10 when it should have been 1st and 10 off the read option play. In typical like Jalen Hurts fashion, he then bails you out on the very next play by running it for 40 yards. And I thought that was a pretty great summation of the Jalen Hurts experience, where for one play, I'm like, well, what was that? And then on the second play, I'm like, what the fuck was that? And then on the third play, I'm like, all right, cool, we solved the problem. I think that's a pretty good summation of how it feels watching Jalen Hurts sometimes. And I again, he's great in a lot of aspects and really weak in others. And there's this thing that Eagles fans are doing where there's been analysts online who have criticized Hurts, and a lot of them are like backup quarterbacks. And we're like, well, you're a backup and Jalen Hurts is really good. It's like, yeah, but they also are making solid points that he's not reading and reacting to the game really well. And I thought today it wasn't just the reading and reacting, it was certain situations of just knowing time and place, which we've criticized Nick Sirianni for before. Yes, there were times where he did not read and react well enough and he missed A.J. Brown, which frustrates me, and I want to talk about A.J. Brown in a little bit. But there's other times where, like, they try that like RPO to kind of get the Panthers off balance when they're trying to drain clock there on the final drive that they had the ball in the fourth quarter. And it worked on the first play. They got it to A.J. Brown. Everyone thought they were going to run it. They run the RPO. It's 11 yards through the passing. Great. That was really, really good. And then they try to go back to that. On that play, it looks like it's not there. It looks like he could have probably handed it off. I don't judge that part. But then taking a slide to set up 2nd and 18 instead of throwing the ball away, it's like, well, all right, now there's no threat of the run, and you have to throw it in a situation where you want to be running it and want to be draining clock. Why would you ever take that slide? And then you go further down on that drive, and you take a delay of game, which again puts you behind the sticks on a 2nd and 13 when you're trying to drain clock. And then you're putting yourselves into obvious passing down situations when the key to all of your success in the past few months has been how often Saquon Barkley is able to dominate on the ground in fourth quarter situations. And by not knowing time and place and making these bonehead mistakes, as Mark Sanchez said, that puts you in obvious passing downs, and it ruins the feel of your offense, and it ruins that like 4-minute late clock offense that you had. So there were just certain times today, it wasn't just the reading and reacting of seeing wide receivers open and not unleashing it. And you know what? If he throws an interception a time or two, we'll be frustrated, but I think I'm at the point where I'd almost rather he do that and let it rip. Because there's guys coming out of curls, coming out of routes, and the ball should be there on time, on target, and it's not. So that part's frustrating me, and I'd like to see him just let it rip and go for it some of those times, and we'll live with the consequences. Kind of like how Bryce Young was, where it was like it felt like he was in control, and it felt like he was just trusting his receivers. But on top of that today, the added aspect was the mental mistakes in time and place that really, really frustrated you and almost cost them not only on a variety of drives, but at the end of the game there on their final drive, which allowed the Panthers to get the ball back and almost score. So it just, all in all, I just didn't think it was a great Jalen Hurts performance. It's a performance that worries you because any naysayer who talks about him, that is the type of game that you're talking about. If it happens against the Lions, your season is over. Like if this is a playoff game against a Lions offense, there's no mistakes that they if you watch them Thursday night, that situation where the Carolina Panthers were in going the ball 98 yards, the Lions had that on Thursday. They drove down the field, kicked the game-winning field goal, was done. Like, you don't have the ability to make those mistakes against a really good team like the Detroit Lions. And as we get further and further in the season, you start to compare yourself against other good teams, and you'll have another chance to do so next week against the Steelers. Again, Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback. I'm criticizing him a lot today, but I really, really like him. I did not think that this was a good performance. I do think that he will be better, and I think he has been better, especially in this past 2 months or so when they've been on this 9-game winning streak. So let's take a look at some of the comments here on TikTok. Force Jalen Hurts to be a pocket passer and Eagles fall apart. That has been a knock on him. I will say he has been able to be a pocket passer at times. And when he is, it usually gives you good results. He should trust himself more because he actually is pretty good at it. When he bails out of that pocket, we've seen it. It turns into sacks instead of letting it rip to some of his star receivers like A.J. Brown and like Devontae Smith. So that is the knock on him. Become a pocket passer and they will fall apart. But there are times where he's actually been a really successful pocket passer, especially with play action and things like that. It's just like a matter of him trusting himself and trusting his receivers. So we'll see what else we got here. Do you think the Kevin Crest tight end thing is killing me? Why didn't Saquon go off? It is kind of crazy today that Saquon has over 100 yards rushing. And we're like, why didn't he go off? I think it was a culmination of factors. Honestly, I don't think the Panthers did that good of a job in defending him. I just think it was an Eagles thing where they put themselves behind the sticks with penalties and stuff like that. The Panthers won the time of possession, so just out of statistical probability, we saw Saquon Barkley less. Like, we just had less snaps for him. So I think that played a factor as well. So Saquon didn't really go off because we didn't give Saquon the ability to go off, I think was the problem. Saquon won this game for y'all. Bryce Young was the better QB today. Delay of games killed us today. Good game. I appreciate that. Saquon has been awesome. And then Bryce Young, I thought, was the better QB today by far. His work on 3rd and 4th down was wizardry. He did not look like a second-year quarterback, and he looked even less so like a second-year quarterback who had been benched earlier this year and kind of left for dead there. The delay of game penalties did kill the Panthers, and I'm honestly shocked that they didn't call more. Like, there were 3 or 4 times where it got to 0, and then they snapped it a second later, and they didn't call it. So they had 2 or 3 that were called. You could have called it like 7 times. Those announcers were the worst. Hey, the 1 o'clock games, we're not always working with the best slate on the announcers there. Go Birds, but the Panthers game to go Birds, but the Panthers game to play today. Yeah, the Panthers I felt at times were the better team. Sometimes a good college football podcast that I listen to always says, win your clunkers. Like, even if you're a really good team in college football, there will be once or twice a year where you're playing a lesser opponent and you just don't have your A game. And I thought that was the Eagles today. I thought they had their A game last week against the Ravens. I thought they had their A game a week ago against the Rams. I thought they were totally locked in, dominated 2 good teams right there. And today against a Panthers team who was a lesser opponent in terms of what we see on paper, didn't perform like it, and it almost tripped the Eagles up on that one. Let's see what else we got here. Next year is our playoff team for sure. I totally agree. They are really, really good. We got some fantasy football questions in the chat. We were flat and played like it, and we didn't want to be there. I thought it was like a combination of things, and I don't totally blame the Eagles because it has been a really, really tough stretch where on the road, back-to-back weeks, they've been playing 3 straight primetime games. Commanders on Thursday Night Football. Then they went on the road to the West Coast Sunday Night Football against the Rams. Then they come home primetime again on the road against the Ravens. So this was like catching their breath, right? Like, it felt like that we were trying to catch our breath a little bit. And the Panthers, the way that they've been playing in the last month or so, are not the team that you catch your breath against like we would expect, right? Like, there's been times that we over the course of this season and last season where this was just an easy win. They're tanking, they're easy to beat. It hasn't been that way for a month with the Panthers. They're playing really, really good football, and it almost tripped us up today by coming out a little bit flat, especially on offense and even on defense, not getting a lot of pressure. And I thought that was a huge, huge key is we were trying to catch their breath. They are starting to come together as a formidable team. Those crossroads almost cost us today and turned it into a loss. So I appreciate all of the comments there on TikTok about the Eagles game there. Chargers D or Chiefs D. Go with the Chiefs D there tonight. As for the Eagles, one thing that I want to work on going forward, and maybe we'll do so next week against the Steelers, I think that, as crazy as it sounds, with Saquon Barkley vying for MVP in the entirety of the league, the key to this offense to me is A.J. Brown, how they utilize him, how often they get him the ball, how many explosive plays that he has. It's been a while since we were able to get a deep shot for him. Our guy Brandon Lee Gouton pointed this out, but in the first quarter, Jalen Hurts went underneath the Grant Calcaterra, and he had A.J. Brown streaking by himself up the sideline that he could have thrown it to, and he missed him. So we haven't been hitting a lot of home runs with him. But I also think that targets matter a ton too. Getting him the football a ton. And why I say that is I think teams then have to worry about him so much. And it was good to see Devontae Smith back today as well. But teams have to then worry about them so often that they can't stack the box. And that sets up that second half onslaught from Saquon Barkley that we've grown accustomed to loving to see. And they talk about it on every broadcast now. And we've talked about it on this show. It wears you down having to tackle Saquon and get mauled by this offensive line in second halves that by the fourth quarter, you are tired. But setting that up with the aerial attack to A.J. Brown so that they can't have their eyes in the backfield all the time and worry exclusively about Saquon makes it much more difficult to defend this offense. And I go back to put it in a basketball analogy. Kobe Bryant talked about guarding James Harden and why in playoff situations it's easy because if there's no movement in your offense and all 5 guys on defense are keyed in on one player dribbling, it makes it easier to stop that one player no matter how good they are. If defenses and all 11 guys and 8 of them are able to stack the box against your offense, it makes it harder to get those explosive plays with Saquon Barkley. But you can open that up by play action to A.J. Brown, and they did go to him at key spots today. It's curls, it's slants, and then you take it off over the top and take a deep shot to him, which we really haven't done a ton lately. Get him the ball. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but get him 8 to 10 targets a game. There's no reason somebody as good as A.J. Brown is not seeing double-digit targets, even though it is very clear that this is a run-first offense, because the run-first offense works the best when there is a fear of the pass. And I think that's what we'll see in this next month or so, and especially next week against a really good team in the Steelers coming to town who won again today, that A.J. Brown has to be a focal point, and I think he will be, because the last time the Eagles and the Steelers played, I know it was a lot different circumstances, but he had 3 touchdowns. It might have been all of our favorite A.J. Brown game as an Eagle. He was awesome, and I think he'll be awesome next week. I'm going to harp on this again and again every single day leading up to the Steelers game. And we'll be talking about it every single day. We'll have a few live broadcasts here where we talk about fantasy football. We'll talk about the Eagles. We'll talk about the Cowboys on Monday Night Football. So I appreciate everybody who tuned in on YouTube, everybody who commented and tuned in on TikTok as well. If you want to find more of our content, you can at Birds vs. Boys, both on TikTok and on YouTube. Thank you for everybody who's followed, who's commented, who's subscribed. Like I said, we'll be back this week. I will be absolutely banging the drum for A.J. Brown all week. So this is just the beginning of it, but I do appreciate everybody who's followed along. Eagles get the win. They improved to 11-2. They are first in the NFC East. They are still on the heels of the Lions for the 1 seed in the NFC, but we'll see if they can finally catch up. Big week next week for both teams. Lions taking on the Bills, Eagles taking on the Steelers, 2 really good AFC teams. It's a great week of football. We'll talk to you then. Whew. I didn't think they had it there for a second for the Eagles, but they get it done, 11-2. I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.